Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy, speaking to you from the land of Israel. I represent Brit-Am, Brit-Am movement of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. We have searched the whereabouts of the lost 10 tribes. And we have found them, we know where they are. We have proven it. It's been proven from biblical sources, from the Bible, from commentaries on the Bible, from rabbinical rabbis, from the Talmud, from Midrashim, also from secular sources, from history, from chronicles, from archaeology, linguistics. Every field that somehow has something to say on the subject, we've researched it and we have shown how proofs from all the different fields of study all come together and complement each other, supplement each other, intertwine with each other, give us a composite picture which is correct, which proves itself, is proven by internal evidence, also by external standards of inquiry, that show that the lost 10 tribes today are to be found amongst Western nations, amongst peoples in Western Europe, and their offshoots overseas in the USA, in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and wherever else their descendants may be found. That is where the lost 10 tribes are. That is who they are. Now, there are indications that in our end times, remember, we are reaching the end times, and statistically, there's a debate about exactly what the proportions are, but a good proportion, a significant proportion of all the peoples who have ever existed in history are alive today, or if you take the previous few generations into consideration and those that will come after us, that will comprise the overwhelming mass of humanity that has ever existed. So this is significant. So it also this shows its light on how biblical prophecies, which dealt with thousands of years of history, could concentrate on the end times, because in the end times is the main import for humanity. So, and this is what we have. So that we have a verse in the Bible, in Deuteronomy 32, concerning Israelites, and according to the commentators, especially Nachmanides, applying to the lost 10 tribes. Remember, the lost 10 tribes have been separated from Judah. Originally there were 12 tribes of Israel, 12 tribes of Israel together in the land of Israel. After the death of King Solomon, the 10 of the tribes divided, they separated from Judah, set up their own kingdom. This kingdom, after about 200 years, was taken away into exile, taken away by the Assyrians. All of its inhabitants were lost, they lost consciousness of their ancestry, but physically they remained together, more or less, and then they moved. They moved in different directions, they also split up into different groups, but the different groupings through divine providence tended to recoalesce, to come back together over the course of time. And today they are to be found concentrated in certain areas that we mentioned, and that is where the lost 10 tribes are. That is where they are to be found, and that is where historically they gave expression to their Israelite ancestry, to the particular historical task the divine providence had laid upon them, which was the whole reason, or one of the reasons, for them being exiled. It was in order to fulfill their duty, to fulfill their ancestral duty, the things that they had to do, and they did it through the nations that they established in those areas. So that is what we have, and those areas are described, are mentioned in this verse. In Deuteronomy 32, as I said, I would scatter them into corners, or would make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. People would forget who the lost 10 tribes are, they would forget where they are. The lost 10 tribes themselves would forget where they came from, but nevertheless they would exist, and they would have a peculiar role, a particular role, a special task to fulfill, and they have fulfilled it, and they still have aspects of this task to go through. And in Brit-Am we see our obligation, or our yud, our destiny, the thing that we are supposed to do is to inform as many people as possible, especially members of those 10 tribes, who they are, and also to give this message over to Judah, that is the Jewish people, and whoever else may be connected with it or concerned about it. And that is what we endeavor to do. At all events, the Bible indicates that they will be in corners. It says, use the words aphaim. Aphaim, the exact translation of this word is disputed, But Abraham seems to us the most logical, and also say the same to the most important commentators such as Rashi, Ibn Ezra, and Radak. They all said that it relates to the word paya, meaning corner. And this is found in the Bible. The Bible uses the word paya, meaning corner, uses it for the corner of the head. That is, you've seen the side locks that many religious Jews have. I have very short ones, but many religious Jews have long ones. They're known as paya. Why? Because the Bible calls them paya. Why is that? Because they come out at what are considered the corners of the head. And so too, the corner of a field where you have supposed to leave some of the produce when you do the harvest for the poor people is called the paya. Because that is the corner. Paya means corner. And Abraham can be understood to be a verbal form based on the root of this word, meaning they would be cast away into corners of the earth, and that is where they would be at the end times. Abraham means cast them away into corners, from the root word paya, that in Hebrew the P and the F are interchangeable. The same letter is used for the two sounds, and the same words are sometimes pronounced with a P, sometimes with an F, according to basic linguistic principles that govern when the same letter is to be pronounced as beginning with a P or beginning with an F, so it is one and the same. Nachmanides, also known as Ramban, should not confuse him with Rambam with an M. Rambam is Maimonides, and Ramban with an N is Nachmanides. And they were around more or less at the same time. Nachmanides came a little bit later. But they dealt with the same subject, so it's easy to confuse them at the beginning, so that's worth noting. So we have Nachmanides on Deuteronomy 32:26. He says, after him there would not remain a remembrance of the 10 tribes of that among the nations. There would not remain a remembrance of them, that is the 10 tribes among the nations. No one would know where they are. This indicates the exile of the 10 tribes who were sent to the river Gozan, 2 Kings 17:6, as the sages referred to as Sabbation, also known as Sabbation, as see Talmud, Sanhedrin 42b. Nachmanides also said in the Sefer Agula, there's the Book of Redemption, Part 1. He says the Israelites, that is the lost 10 tribes, according to context, he's referring to the lost 10 tribes. He says the Israelites went into exile ever since then, Ephraim. And all the 10 tribes of northern Israel have never since been in the land of Israel. They did not return. The 10 tribes had already been exiled, and they were still in exile in the area of the Canaanites, even unto Zarephath. And this first exile, it says in Abijah 1:20, this first exile, the children of Israel are now from Canaan unto Zarephath, Abijah 1:20. And he said these, Nachmanides continues, these places at the extremes of the north. The general principle concerning these and all similar verses concerning the redemption of Israel and the fall of Edom, the like, is that it is all for the future. Remember that Joseph, leading the 10 tribes, is destined to fight a war against the forces of Edom, that is certain European powers and others, and to defeat them. And Nachmanides says this has never happened. It is prophesied that would happen. It has not happened. Therefore, the lost 10 tribes have not returned, and their identity has not been made known. Nachmanides said the lost 10 tribes in his time were Zarephath, as we quoted, in the far north, as we quoted, Zarephath. Rabbinical exegesis, commentaries, and Jewish tradition meant France. See Rashi, Zarephath in Hebrew is a word name for France. Yair, and also a very important commentator, says that that France and England, Angleterre calls it, were one and the same country. They're both referred to them under the name Zarephath. Zarephath refers to both England and to France. That's where the lost 10 tribes were to be. And we take these commentaries together and we see Zarephath in the west, and that is where the lost 10 tribes are to be found according to these commentaries, and also according to additional biblical verses and numerous studies that confirm this. It is worth knowing that these great people, these great commentators, also had a similar tradition to that. Now, who was Nachmanides? We had a request. Someone requested we often quote different peoples, different great sages. So I was pushing over our audience, Christians or non-Christians. Many of them, or most of them, are not Jewish. And these names are strange to them. They are not familiar with them. But they are, what they say is interesting, is important. So someone asked if we could give a little biographical sketch now and again concerning these people, so that some people obtain a familiarity, an acquaintance with those who are being spoken of. Nachmanides, 1194 to 1270. He was also known as Aramban. Aramban was born in Giron, Catalonia. Catalonia is in the northeast of Spain. It was near the French border. He has been described, Nachmanides has been described as a leading medieval Jewish scholar, a Sephardic rabbi, a philosopher, physician, Kabbalist, a mystical commentator, and biblical commentator. He was trained, Nachmanides was trained to be a doctor of medicine. He was recognized as a leading authority in Jewish religious law and in philosophical questions. He stresses in his commentary on the Torah and also his other writings, he stresses the duty of all Jews when they can to live in the land of Israel and to reconquer it, to conquer it. He says that is a commandment, a positive commandment, an obligation upon every Jewish person to do what he can to conquer the land of Israel and to take possession of it for the people of Israel. He also stressed the duty of living a good life, of being healthy, a healthy attitude to life, of keeping the commandments but not overdoing it in the direction of too much extremism, not being ascetic, because that is against the Torah, he said. And so that was his attitude. In 1263, a Jewish convert to Christianity known as Pablo Cristiani in Spain, he persuaded King James I of Aragon. Aragon was an area bordering Castile. Effectively, he ruled over Castile at that time in the north of Spain, and he was induced. King James I of Aragon was induced by Pablo Cristiani and the Dominicans, of whom Pablo Cristiani was a member, or he was protected by them. He was under their protection, and they brought King James I of Aragon to arrange a public disputation between the Jews and the Christians. And Nachmanides was forced to say why they do not accept the Christian Messiah and other issues. And they had an argument, they had a public debate on this matter, and the king presided over it together with a panel of experts, non-Jewish experts. And they presided over this panel, and Nachmanides debated this disputation against Pablo Cristiani and others, and Nachmanides was considered to have won. The king and the panel, they said that the arguments of Nachmanides were the most convincing. Nachmanides was awarded a large monetary prize for his efforts, and the king was quite pleased with him. But nevertheless, shortly afterwards, the Pope and the Dominicans, they pressured the king of Aragon to expel Nachmanides from the kingdom, at first for a few years, after that forever, and Nachmanides was obligated to leave. So for 3 years he wandered about different places in Spain and in France, and then after that he went to the land of Israel. In 1267 then he established the Ramban synagogue that still exists in the old city of Jerusalem. There were very few Jews there at the time because a group of Tartars, Muslims, actually, the people who mistakenly blame the Crusaders for it, but shortly before then, Tartar Muslims from Central Asia had destroyed the whole of Jerusalem, and there were very few, and then it began to be rebuilt, and about less than 10 Jews would appear in the whole area. So Nachmanides came there, he built the synagogue there, and he began to establish something of a community in Jerusalem. And he linked the Israelites dwelling in the land of Israel with keeping the law. He emphasized that according to Leviticus 18, 27, the land is defiled, therefore I do wish to visit the iniquities thereof upon, and the land itself vomited out his inhabitants. And he learns from this that sexual offences, especially sexual offences, all sins, but especially sexual ones, are what causes the land to be polluted and to vomit the Jews and the Israelites out of it. And anyone who wants to come and live in the land of Israel should endeavour to keep the law, because even more than anyone who is born, whoever is born has an obligation. But the obligation is much stronger in the land of Israel than outside of it. That is the basic message of the Ramban on this point. Now we mentioned that Rashi, 1040-1105, Ibn Ezra, Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra, 1089-1167, and Radak, 1160-1235, they all explained Ephraim to mean corners of the earth. Now that is where we find the lost 10 tribes. Lost 10 tribes centres include North America, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Scandinavia and Western Europe. These are all corners of the earth. Lost 10 tribes are in areas that are all applicable to be named as corners of the earth. And before we go on, we should give a few biographical notes of the other, or some of the others that we quote. Who was Rashi? Rashi was known as Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, 1040-1105. He was born and lived in the northern French province of Champagne. He was a maker of wine. He grew grapes in Champagne. The Champagne is famous as being an expensive and a valuable type of wine, and Rashi and fellow Jewish winekeepers, viticulturists, may have been responsible for introducing or developing this type of vineyard. At all events, Rashi earned his living from it. He was there. In 1096, in the time of Rashi, the People's Crusade swept through the Lorraine area of where there's the area of Rashi. They murdered 12,000 Jews and uprooted whole communities. And Rashi wrote several prayers of lamentation and mourning over the slaughter and destruction of this region's great houses of study, yeshivot, and communities. Rashi also wrote commentaries. Rashi wrote commentaries on the Bible and on the Talmud. And Christian scholars were later very much influenced by the commentary of Rashi when the Christians began to translate the Bible from Hebrew or from Greek into their vernacular, into their own languages. So when they came to difficult passages, they often consulted with Jewish scholars, or they themselves were sufficiently proficient in Hebrew studies to look the works up on their own. And Rashi was one of their favourites for explaining it. So the Christian Bible has been influenced. What we have as a Christian Bible was influenced in its interpretation by the commentaries of Rashi. We also have Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra. Rabbi Abraham Ibn Ezra, 1086-1167. He was born in Tudela, in the province of Navarre, in northwest Spain. That is Basque. There's a Basque territory. The Basque lives there, so that was where he was born. He lived as like a wandering scholar. He was also a scientist, a merchant. He wrote commentaries on several books of the Bible. He's also been credited with inventing or improving upon astronomical instruments. He wrote works on mathematics. He also travelled very widely. In his commentaries, he makes note of what he saw in all kinds of far-off places, what he saw in Egypt, what he saw in India. Eventually it's believed that he died in England. It's not certain. He got around and he knew things. And his commentary is worthwhile. Another commentator is Rabbi David Kin, 1160-1235. He was a medieval rabbi, a biblical commentator, philosopher, and grammarian. He was into grammar and grammatical points. He was born in Narbonne in southern France. His father and brother were also well-known scholars. He supported himself by teaching Talmud to the young Jews. And his Hebrew style is of a very high literary level. It's very impressive. He writes very well. It's a work of art how he writes, and also his interpretation of the Bible also became a favourite amongst Gentile interpretators and early Christian scholars on the Bible in the Reformation times. And he was especially influential on what became the King James Version, the English translation of the Bible. Now, getting back to what we mentioned that the lost 10 tribes were to be found in the corners of the earth. We have other verses saying that they will be at the ends of the earth. So ends of the earth and corners of the earth are virtually the same thing. The two concepts overlap with each other. And there are a lot of passages that indicate the lost 10 tribes would be at the ends of the earth. See Isaiah 43:6. Ends of the earth mean the geographical extremities as measured from Jerusalem. Jerusalem is considered the centre of the earth. And most of the ends of the earth in the world, they belong to Israel. They are, the sense of Israel possess them. North America, the British Isles, West and Northwest Europe, Scandinavia, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. All these areas may be considered ends of the earth, and all the people dwelling in them are dominated, descend from the lost 10 tribes. All the lost 10 tribes are an important fundamental element amongst them. So this is how the prophecy has been fulfilled in this way. As I said, that in the end times, indications are that a good portion of the lost 10 tribes will be found in North America, Canada and the USA. And the concept of corner of the world where the lost 10 tribes would be, that is significant concerning the classical term New World. America was known as the New World. Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. At first he believed the land he discovered was part of Asia. Other navigators followed Columbus and they raised the possibility that it was not Asia but another continent. And Columbus himself, towards the end of his life, he tended to agree with him. He made several trips to the region, and himself he also tended to think it was not Asia but another continent. There was Amerigo Vespucci also held this opinion. He too had travelled around and navigated portions of the coast of the continents of America, and he believed that they were a separate continent, and his opinion was the most influential one. It was the one that brought most people around to thinking in that direction, and he referred to the Americas as Mudus Novus, or New World. Others had said something similar before him, had used the term. The concept was already known, and the continent was named America after Amerigo Vespucci, who had this opinion, and he referred to the Americas as another, or a new world, a fourth continent, and so we have the name America because of him. The ideas along in this direction had also been held by others even before the time of Columbus, but Columbus and the navigators, Amerigo Vespucci and the others, they brought proof of them. They sailed to the areas and they had brought witness testimony of where they had been, and also gave directions as how to get there again. So they justifiably considered the discoverers of that region, and the region was known as New World. In Jewish commentaries from that area, from that era, such as the Maharal of Prague, he writes about America and he refers to it as New World. This was a common name for the Americas, it was New World. A New World also has significance in agricultural terms. Wikipedia tells us under the entry New World, Asia, Africa and Europe share a common agricultural history. They have the same domesticated plants and animals, and they are largely indistinct and useful to classify as Old World. In other words, you have Asia and Europe and Africa. They all have wheat, they all have the same crops, barley, oats, lentils, peas, rye, wheat. They all grow in the same place. Domesticated animals, cattle, sheep, goats, horses, pigs, they all belong to, all shared by them. They have the same animals in the same regions, especially domesticated ones. And they did not exist in the Americas at the beginning until the Europeans brought them there. There were no horses. You associate Red Indians with riding horses all the time. But they didn't have horses until the white man brought them to them. The same way in Europe, we didn't have potatoes until we got them from South America. And the potatoes helped feed the population explosion that occurred in Europe shortly afterwards. So we're all eating potatoes. So this is worth noting. Also, conversely, Wikipedia goes on, many common crops now were originally domesticated in the Americas before they spread worldwide after Columbian contact, and are still referred to as New World crops. Things which came from the New World include beans, maize, there's corn, sweet corn, squash, avocado, tomato, bell pepper, chili pepper, the turkey. The turkey, we all eat turkeys. That originally came from America. Also we have a cassava, peanuts, potatoes, quinoa, alpaca, guinea pig, llama, cashew, cocoa, rubber, sunflower, tobacco and vanilla, guava, papaya, pineapple. And all of these came from the Americas to Europe. So America had different crops, different animals. America was a new world, and that is one of the reasons why it got his name, or an aspect of this name, New World. And America is in effect a corner, a previously unknown corner of the globe, and that is where the lost in tribes were to be found. Not they're not already there, but they were to go there, and that is where they are, in the USA and in Canada. It's a new world in biblical terms. The expression for New World is to be found in Deuteronomy 29:28, where it says, "The Lord rooted them out of their land in anger and in wrath and in great indignation, and cast them into another land as it is this day," to another land. Eretz Aheret, it says. That's where the lost tribes would be. The sages and Talmud, Sanhedrin 10, said that this prophecy referred to the lost end tribes, who were destined to be in another land, Eretz Aheret, until the end times. Doesn't mean that they were there, that they would eventually be there in the end times when the verse would be most pertinent, most applicable. And as we said, a good portion of the people who have ever lived in history are now alive today, or in the few generations back, taking them all together, and those who come after us, we have most people who ever existed alive around these times, these end times. And it says the lost in tribes, according to this, would be in another land, Eretz Aheret. And Eretz Aheret in biblical Hebrew has the same connotation as New World in Latin. It means the same. It's another way of saying it. The word for word in Latin or in English, the word for land, another land, Eretz in Hebrew, can also mean world. So in other words, New World is a new Eretz, a new land, the same as in Hebrew, and the word new can mean a recently discovered, the same as Aheret in Hebrew. So we have Eretz Aheret, another land in Hebrew, literally can also mean New World, and that according to the prophecies where the lost ten tribes were to be found. Now we have other points that we talk about again in the future, we've spoken about in the past, and one of them is that other significations concerning lost ten tribes also apply to America. The whole of the Atlantic Ocean, or a part of it, the northern part of it, is destined to be part of the land of Israel in the future, and that includes North America, and that's where the lost ten tribes are. And all of these significations taken together all show that lost ten tribes will be concentrated in that region, and that is where the lost ten tribes are. And we prove it not only from this type of exegesis, this type of commentary, but also from other sources, from historical sources, from other straightforward biblical passages. And it all fits together, it all comes together, and all has pertinence. And by learning all of these different sources, taking cognizance of all these different approaches, we get to the same one conclusion, that the lost ten tribes are in that region. May the Lord God of Israel bless you. Thank you.